This today is an explosion of ideas, concepts, taking your plans, taking your actions to actualization, bringing it forward. But that bedrock of bringing forward your ideas, bringing forward the process, stems, I would say, by the people behind the business, each one of you. I've had the opportunity of not only working in the ICU, but becoming an entrepreneur myself, having that idea, having that vision that I wanted to do more than just save lives. Yes, there is a thing as more than just saving lives. Because having worked in the ICU, and I'm sharing a little bit of my entrepreneurial journey, I saw a lot of end stage. I saw way too many lack of self-care that landed up into complications. I saw heart attacks waiting to happen. Each one of these things, and we're wondering, why am I going so morbid? Because it's a reality every single creative and entrepreneur faces in building those businesses. And I thought to myself, instead of having this conversation with the family, I wish, and I want to put this into your mindset. This is in 2011, 2010, we're in 2022 now. Back then, I put that conversation out to the universe. I wish I had the opportunity to not have the conversation with one or two people, but have it with hundreds of thousands. As of today, and Natasha, it was a long bio to introduce. Part of that bio, I'm also the editor and the voice behind the health communications in Guardian Media and on radio. So I'm the only doctor in the country on TV, radio, print. At any given point in time, there are more than 250,000 people listening to this voice. 12 years ago, I planted that seed, but it took a lot of courage and bravery. And it's important that each one of you all here as entrepreneurs pay attention to your work-life balance. Those are just some of the other titles that I would have acquired along the way. I'm the technical advisor to the Diabetes Association. I've had the honor of pursuing leadership training with John Maxwell Leadership Course. I've also had the honor of being a United Nations Woman Trainer in the behavior change process for gender-based violence. So I ask you, besides from being hungry right now, when you're going through your creative process, does this image look familiar? Raise your hands. During the pandemic, they certainly did look familiar, right? It felt familiar. Well, the image to the top was just about all of our ICU doctors. They did call me back in to do a lot of training for our younger ones to ensure the self-care of our younger ones in particular. And how about this? Is this not the mind of every single creative? A million ideas? How do you streamline it? That was a productive session, but what's the next step? And again, I'm taking you into the position of being in an ICU, the intensive care unit, and all you're hearing around is beeps and many emergencies coming to you. So the life of an entrepreneur is no different from an ICU doctor. So too is the stress level. And that's why this conversation is so important. So my conversation is on work-life balance, but I'm here to dispute that. And you can say Dr. Mohammed said, there's no such thing as work-life balance. None. It does not exist. Don't try to achieve it. But here's what there is. There's work-life blend. Because let me explain that a little further. The day I'm in hospital, or the day I'm on TV, and the cameras are in front of me, if my child has an emergency, I'm not the mummy in that role. But the day I'm mummy with my child when he does have an emergency, I can't be a doctor to my patients. So there's no such thing as that balance. There's rather a blend of what we do on a day-to-day basis. And let me just jump straight into these 3 myths. Before I do that, We all talked about our mentors. We had incredible conversations shared to us earlier. This is one mentor, and Oprah Winfrey shared, I've learned that you cannot have everything and do everything at the same time. Echoing, there's no such thing as work-life balance. So myth one, the term balance implies a 50-50 split. But like we shared, there's no such thing. Harvard Business Review during the pandemic indicated, especially during the pandemic, that the average work week expanded to more than 60 hours. Many professionals then worked outside of that 8-hour bracket. There were no boundaries, and so too with entrepreneurs. 2 o'clock in the morning, you're still working on that idea. That's my best time for writing. Myth two, work-life balance attempts to achieve that we can disconnect from work at home. Anyone here is capable of that disconnect? If you do, let me know the secret and I'll produce your book for you. I don't think it exists. And here's what has also technology, COVID-19 showed us. It transformed our 9 to 5 into a hyper-connected 24/7, and work and life bled into each other. The American Physiological Association found that more than half of people check in their work messages well after work, even if they're on vacation. I know I'm guilty of it. Not so? Which one of us isn't? And myth three, and this is one I want us to pay particular attention to, that self-care is selfish and can be deprioritized. That's the myth. And that's the myth I want us to bust. All through COVID-19, persons would have heard my voice when we went to different companies to really break down some of those myths about the vaccines. Emil would be familiar with that, right? This is a myth I want us to completely eradicate. Self-care is absolutely not selfish. In fact, it's priority. And I'm so glad as I walk through the booths that there were so many young entrepreneurs leaning into the line of wellness, health coaching, candles, aromatherapy, setting priorities and developing positive self-care habits and behaviors that support a better balance, less overwhelm, less absenteeism for all those in the major workplaces, less burnout, less chronic stress. And that's important because I take you to this slide. Medicine 101, you got entrepreneurship 101, technology 101, digitization 101. I present you medicine 101. Stress affects every single part of your body. But here's a very interesting fact that private healthcare professionals, GPs, shared that when patients came in to talk about their signs and symptoms, the word stress never came up. They talk about their headache. They talk about problems sleeping. But are they able to make that connect? Are they able to recognize the somatization, the signs and symptoms? Stress affects every single part of your body. And I also want to share that everyone who's here, there's a little gift basket for someone who answers a correct question. So stay tuned, okay? Let's move on. We're in the world of business. So how about some numbers about what stress does to the body, what stress does to the company? This is by a very prominent study, the Gallup study. And they have estimated more than $2.2 trillion loss in the US due to stress. Where do we spend most of our time as entrepreneurs? You spend most of your hours in your business. $1.1 billion cost of chronic disease, $300 billion cost of work-related stress. You want to know what's the most important thing that I want to share here to you? That, this, it's all preventable. See, if we know how to cope properly. But we've recognized, even in the medical care facilities, even in our own, we just had a massive medical symposium, and even doctors were not properly taught how to manage their stress. Fathers, entrepreneurs. And during pandemic, you would have heard the word NCDs about 100 billion times. There's the non-communicable disease wellness tree versus illness tree. And here's where I'm going to pause. We're hearing the word illness and stress, and we're hearing disease. I want the first person who stands up and answers this question is the person who's going to get a fantastic prize from CeraVe, which is L'Oreal Bride and Pride products, skincare products that I swear by. I'm asking every single one of you, but you have to stand and give me the answer. You would have heard many of your speakers before talk about working together as a team, talk about not doing this on your own, even as an entrepreneur, finding your tribe. I present to you the word illness. If we take off the I from illness and we add WE, what word do we get? Well done. Repeat this again. Wellness. And I want you to just remember that. If you remember nothing from my presentation, you take off the I from illness and you get wellness. So I hope we have attempted to resolve some of these myths about work-life balance. Understand that it's integrating the ebbs and flows of your life, creating, as some would have mentioned before, proper, manageable cognitive health goals, recalibrating false expectations and guilts, understanding that the misconception of achieving work-life balance can be unhealthy and against your wellness. As Mahatma Gandhi shared, your health is your true wealth. And I wish there were more persons sitting into this, because every single entrepreneur, I see their presentations of stress, anxiety. Again, Harvard Business Review, in an even more recent, the last one I quoted was 2021, this is 2018, have shared, and this was the year I registered my company. We have forgotten that organizations are first and foremost places of human interaction, not just transaction. So I'm just going to jump into a few more slides because we must leave you with how to balance or how to find that blend. So how do you set the tone to counter this stress? And before I jump into that, this experience, this wisdom, this expertise that I'm sharing to you is not because I worked in the ICU. It's not because I'm 17 years as a medical doctor, and as you would have heard from Natasha, graduated as class valedictorian at the top of my class. It's not because I worked in places of critical care. It's because of this young man who was delivered prematurely, 7 weeks a little too early, but firmly believes and walks the path that even a smallest one can change the world. He was diagnosed as autistic, and regardless of what anybody says, I do not believe he's limited in any which way. I see him through the lens of extraordinary abilities. He has shown me, and I understand limitations at a granular level because of what we've experienced in his education, especially in the last 2 years when we had so many different adaptations. Let me explain the life of an autistic, and I'm not saying at age 10 and 11, but I'm talking about age 4 and 5. They're so particular in following protocol and guide. If there's any deviation, it can land in an amplification of their presentations. They can go into full-blown tantrums. Age 3, if I'm washing his face and I happen to wash left eye before right eye, but he wants right eye before left eye, that's the end of the day. If the bell doesn't go off on the time the bell is supposed to go off, that's the end of the day. Autistics see the world in a beautiful way, but their senses, their neurodivergence, they can be amplified, and they are very routine-based. So pivoting off of that, how do you teach a child to adjust, to move through, to manage life, And that's where you would have heard Natasha talked about part of my journey is implementing yoga and meditation. So a lot of this is because I live it on a granular day-to-day process. And he has taught me more about the lens of life than any book, any medical knowledge that I've gained could have taught me. So that level of stress, here's the key thing I want you to remember. It's the imbalance between the demands placed on you and your coping mechanisms. You can have a host of stress, but if your coping mechanisms is strong, you can balance a whole lot more. If your capacity to manage, to cope, your resilience, as you heard Rishi and they talked about earlier, your tenacity, then you can cope. And I don't need to go into this into too much detail, but there's good stress and there's bad stress. It becomes bad when it becomes chronic. Think of a light, think of the red light in your car. You ever ignore the red light in your car? No. But how many of us ignoring the red lights going on in our body? Yeah? So when we have the chronic stress and then we dwell on the negative habits over and over and over and over, that's when it becomes unhealthy. And that's when negative stress leads to all of those ICU concerns, from heart attack, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, amplification of all of those things. Now I'm going to just take a few more moments. I'm coming to a close because I want to lean into about specifically creatives. A couple of years ago, well before COVID, we did a conversation on resilience with the Export TT creatives. And this was a statistic that I presented there. The creatives, because they're so creative, they also live a life of a double-edged sword. The same thing that makes you brilliant in your innovative and entrepreneurship life is the same aspect that will also bring you increased anxiety and stress, sometimes even to unbearable frustration, sometimes even to suicide. And this is something that I'm very particular about. I'm in a number of mental health capacities, serving in different leadership positions. Here in Trinidad, TTPS shared that we had something like 88 persons in between January and August that unfortunately succumbed to suicide. 77 of those were male. And our male population, because of toxic masculinity, is not given that opportunity to share their stresses. So I want to emphasize the importance of that wellness more than ever. You're not alone. Recognize this image, Vincent van Gogh? Do you know that Vincent van Gogh famously cut off his ear? Unfortunately, he also succumbed to suicide. And he shared, I am unable to describe exactly what is the matter with me. He wrote in a letter to his brother a couple of years before his death, now and then there are horrible fits of anxiety, apparently without cause, and otherwise a feeling of emptiness and fatigue in the head. This is serious, and I'm sorry to be so morbid. I promise the reason I developed this company is I do not want to see another person succumb or be in the ICU for the wrong reasons. So I'm taking you on this poem, and I want you to remember this poem. Yesterday, anyone who was stuck in that traffic, it may have felt like this. Today was the absolute worst day ever. And don't try to convince me there's something good in every day, because when you take a closer look, the world is a pretty evil place. Even if some goodness doesn't shine through once in a while, satisfaction and happiness doesn't last. And it's not true that it's all in the mind and heart, because true happiness can be obtained only if one's surroundings are good. It's not true that good exists. I'm sure you can agree the reality creates my attitude. It's all beyond my control, and you'll never in a million years hear me say, today was a good day. You wonder why did I go so deep, so morbid? I know creatives may feel like that at some time, but I'm going to ask you to turn it around, and I'm going to read from the bottom go up. Read it with me in your mind quietly. Today was a good day, and you'll never in a million years hear me say it's all beyond my control. My attitude creates the reality. I'm sure you can agree that it's not true that good exists only if one's surroundings are good. True happiness can be obtained because it's all in the mind and heart. Satisfaction and happiness don't last. It's not true that satisfaction and happiness don't last, because some goodness does shine through once in a while, even if the world is a pretty evil place. Because when you take a closer look, there's something good in every day. And don't try to convince me today was the absolute worst day ever. Entrepreneurs, I want you to remember we all go through those ebbs and flows and depths of anxiety. You are absolutely not alone. But empower yourself with your tribe. Empower yourself with your vision, your why. Keep your vision board close by. And believe me, you will get through those last depths days. So what is that superpower? If you had a superpower, what would you want it to be? I'm going to run through the last couple slides. I want you to remember your potential, your power to pivot. Remember the inspiration today. Remember that our brain contains 100 billion neurons. And remember that Thomas Edison, who developed the incandescent light bulb cell, he didn't fail. He just found 10,000 ways that did not work. So I end here with the 10 commandments of managing stress. And I shared to you my little one. His name is Musa. So technically, which is Prophet Moses in Arabic, he was the first person with a tablet downloading data from the cloud, okay? That's my son's little meme and his joke that he loves. This is your 10 commandments for managing stress. Thou shalt not expect someone else to reduce your stress. Thou shalt not resist change. Thou shalt continue to learn. Thou shalt not work alone. Keep that in mind. Thou shalt not work harder. Thou shalt work smarter. Thou shalt seek to find joy and mastery in thy work and life. Thou shalt not guilt or blame oneself or others. Thou shalt not take thyself in vain. Remember what is holy to thee and honor your limits. I'm going to run through the rest of this because we are really out of time. And I want you to remember that if you had that superpower, one last word I'm leaving you with. The name of the company is SISU, Global Wellness. How did I find that word? Have you ever heard that word? Anybody ever heard the word? This is this beautiful word that I stumbled across on my travels. I've had the opportunity of presented now all over the world, from Maldives to United Nations to Dubai to South Africa, you name it, I've presented. SISU. It is that extraordinary determination, courage, and resoluteness in the face of extreme adversity, an action mindset which enables individuals to reach beyond their present limitations, take action against all odds, and transform barriers into frontiers. An integral element of the Finnish culture and a universal capacity which we all share. So the next time you feel overwhelmed or burdened, especially as an entrepreneur, know that that capacity is within you. Yes, there are many different coping mechanisms, and we can have the conversation thereafter, from mindfulness to yoga to meditation to journaling, you name it. We can get more information if you join me on our CNC3 Morning Brew at Health Plus. Anytime you see the brand Health Plus, I'm the editor to that magazine. We continue the conversation on radio. As I mentioned, we've been able, through Guardian Media, to reach more than 250,000 people, and I've seen those changes. And we can take feedback after. So if anyone want to get in contact with me, that's the number. This company was one that was formed out of pure passion and purpose. And while I thought that I was changing the world when I was in the ICU, because Natasha shared I was awarded for the work I did within public health. Now for certain, we've had hundreds of partners all across the world, really creating resilience, transforming lives, and shaping destinies. I thank you.